Hi, I'm Malcolm Roberts. And in 2007, I wrote a letter to John Howard because he was booted out, and I expressed my appreciation to him for his service over many years to this country. And in 2014, after 7 years of voluntary research, I wrote him a second letter, rescinding my first letter. And Sharon Lohse, who's the candidate for Flynn, and I, who am the candidate for the Senate in this state, are going to tell you why the John Howard government did so much damage to this country. It is destroying the country still. I want to start first of all by mentioning that you've been a very strong fighter for 15 years, Sharon, for property rights.
Yes, that's correct. We were made aware of this property rights issue through the loss of our land security of our property, our grazing lease. So this brought us into a legal battle. And then after we went into the Supreme Court and won that legal battle, legislation then by the state government legislated against us renewing our lease when it comes up for renewal again. We then had to delve ourselves and work out how it could be possible that the government could change the tenure of our property without our knowledge and without compensation. So this led us to the investigation into the loss of property rights.
And you've been fighting very strongly for 15 years, for not only your case, but for other farmers.
Yes, we instigated a landholder group of people that were also affected. We found out through Freedom of Information that about 82 people, families, were affected right across the Queensland in the instance where our tenure was changed. We didn't find everybody, but we found a group of people, about 30 families that were affected. We instigated legal advice. However, over the years of fighting, you can understand that people simply, literally, wear out. They run out of energy. It's a very emotional drain while you're trying to manage your property, while you're trying to make a living basically and rear your family. You're also fighting for your property rights at the same time, so it takes a big toll. And now I only keep in touch with probably about a half a dozen that are still trying to fight this issue.
Well, let's get to the core of the issue, because a lot of farmers think that it's the Labor government that's caused this problem, but it's not.
No.
It's actually the John Howard Liberal National Party government that kicked it off in 1996 to comply with the UN Kyoto Protocol. Remember that, the UN is driving this. And here's how they did it. In 1996, John Howard was voted into power. In 1996, the UN passed the Kyoto Protocol, which required governments to cut back on carbon dioxide production. And John Howard had a problem. He said to all people in Australia that we will not sign the Kyoto Protocol, and we all cheered. But he said quite openly and publicly, we will comply with the Kyoto Protocol. Now that required either shutting down production of power stations, industrial plants, or stopping farmers clearing land. And that would mean that the land would still be able to absorb carbon dioxide. And I'll get back to that in a minute. Now he knew that we weren't ready for shutting down our industry, although that's what's happened as a result of other things that John Howard and the Labor Party have done. So what he did was he took the soft approach, and he didn't go to the farmers. His government deceitfully stole the land without compensation from farmers across the country. Let me tell you how. What he did was he went to the Borbidge National Party government. We had John Howard, who was the Liberal Party Prime Minister, did a deal with Rob Borbidge, the National Party Premier. We had John Anderson signed the agreement along with John Howard and Rob Borbidge. He signed the agreement as Deputy Prime Minister and Leader of the Nationals in the Federal Parliament. And they signed it with Brian Littleproud, who was the Minister for the Environment. And then over here on the Liberal Party and federal government, we had Robert Hill, Senator Robert Hill, Liberal Party Minister for the Environment. And over here we had Howard Hobbs, who was National Party Minister for Natural Resources. Yeah. Entirely Liberal National. And what they agreed to do was to put in place restrictions on farmers clearing their land. So that meant they stole farmers' property rights, because farmers bought that land on the basis that they could develop it for crops or for whatever way they wanted to. In 1998, Peter Beattie came on the scene, and John Howard, I've seen the correspondence between Beattie and Howard. John Howard's government said basically to Peter Beattie, we'll give you hundreds of millions of dollars to stop the farmers clearing their land. So Peter Beattie enacted, under the Labor Party, the Native Vegetation Protection legislation that stopped farmers clearing the land. In 2004, Peter Beattie ramped it up. And in 2017, Anastasia Palaszczuk, we believe pushed by Jackie Trad, basically decimated the farmers by really restricting their land. And now we've got farmers facing jail. We've got farmers on criminal charges because it is now a criminal offence. When they took your land rights, they didn't give any compensation. No. They didn't honour the court and the law of the land. They changed the law. Yes. What's happened here is that in section 51, clause 31 of the federal constitution, the Australian Constitution, it says that if property rights are taken, just terms compensation must be paid. So that's what faced the John Howard government. They couldn't steal farmers' property rights. That's why they went through the states. And Peter Beattie, in correspondence, has acknowledged that they did it for John Howard. Bob Carr is as a recording of him acknowledging that he did it for John Howard to comply with the UN's Kyoto Protocol. So John Howard, to avoid paying compensation, his government went to the states, and the states enacted legislation because they don't have to pay compensation. And so they took the land, the use of that land, the right to use that land, which is what farmers paid for, they stole it and didn't pay compensation. Now that, on the John Howard's government, was a dirty, deceitful trick to go around the back of the Constitution, violate the farmers and steal their land rights. That is it in a nutshell. Now this is not good governance. This is atrocious governance. And that's why I wrote my 2014 letter. And that's why I don't vote Liberal. And that's why I used to vote Liberal and occasionally Labor, but I will never vote for those two failed old parties. What we need to do, Sharon, is we need to restore farmers' property rights because they've been stolen. Yes. Or they need to be compensated. Yeah. It's costing farmers tens, possibly hundreds of billions of dollars in lost property rights. That needs to be compensated. You don't pick on farmers because the National Party is folded into the cabinet and no longer does their job looking after the bush. What you do is you go honestly to the farmers and you say restoration or compensation.
All farmers ever want to do is to do what they know best, which is produce the wonderful green product that the world is seeking from Australia. That's why our export industry is so important. Yep. And it's because our worldwide reputation of clean green produce. Yep. And all we want to do is for the government to get out of the road and let us to produce our product to our best ability as we have been for generations.
Yep. And the farmers are having a go, but we need to give them a go. And the other thing about farmers is that they're not looking for handouts. They just want a hand up, because the Murray-Darling Basin, the stealing of property rights, the PFAS contamination around defence bases is gutting farmers. And it's your food supply, your food security, right throughout Australia, in the cities where most of our people live. You depend upon people like Sharon.
And the consequence will be that our food prices will continue to climb. People's standard of living will be affected by dearer food.
And I never thought I'd get upset about things like this, but I know that at the bottom of this is deceit. Yes. By the John Howard government and by the Labor Party governments. Because all of this governance has been destroyed pandering to the UN, and that'll be the source of another video. But right now, I'm calling for restoration of farmers' property rights or compensation. Yes. Restoration or compensation. Because we need to protect our food security right across the country. And thank you so much for 15 years of fighting, Sharon. It's wonderful.
Thank you, Malcolm.
And we need you in Parliament because you're a fighter.
Thank you very much.